guys doing, church? All right, are you guys excited? Yeah. I know I am excited because, as Rob said, we're continuing our Own Your Influence series. Influence, which is exciting. I mean, I've told you guys several times that I'm a nerd, so while in college, this is a topic that I studied a lot because I enjoyed it. So they had this whole leadership fellow thing that you started in your freshman year, and you took StrengthsFinder in that first year, and you studied time management, and then as you got into your sophomore year, you went a little deeper in that, and your junior year even more because then you're starting to look at jobs and you're starting to look at companies, so companies like leaders, or so every job description says, right? So we kept studying, going through that until my senior year at this point, where I had the opportunity to do a leadership fellowship, which was just really a very fancy title to say I was going to do a little bit of research on leadership and the leadership of our school and figure out a way to try and make our student leaders grow a little faster and go even deeper into their college experience and their leadership studies. So that was one way that I explored leadership, but there are people who spend their lifetime studying this, and there are people that get master's degrees in the discussion topic that we're going to talk about tonight. And what we're going to talk about tonight is servant leadership. I mean, I will tell you that there are people with PhDs in servant leadership, and I'm not one of them. I'm not at all here trying to be an expert on this topic, but I truly, truly believe that we have an amazing and perhaps the greatest, in my opinion, and I hope that by the end of tonight, that'll be your opinion too, the greatest example of servant leadership ever was in the life of Jesus. And in fact, many of those PhDs would agree with us because they use him as a case study for servant leadership. So tonight, we're going to go right into that and continuing on our series. And we're going to talk about a passage of the Bible that's actually the inspiration for the graphic that's behind me. So if that's a hint for you guys, we're going to talk a little bit about John chapter 13 when Jesus washes the disciples' feet. So I want to first set the stage for you because it's been 3 years that Jesus is with his disciples, and I love reading John because you get to see how human the disciples are, and you get to, at least I get to sympathize with them a little bit and empathize too, because aren't they knuckleheads in so many ways? And I know that I'm a knucklehead, and Rob loves using that word. All of them are knuckleheads, and John, I especially like him because he likes to throw people under the bus. Like every other gospel writer kind of leaves things a little veiled, but he just puts it all out there and shows all the times that people fell short of understanding what Jesus was explaining. And that's exactly what we are going to go into today. So they had been traveling for a few days on the way to, as we would know, spoiler alert, Jesus would go to the cross. And that was towards the last few days of his ministry. And after days and days of traveling, they come to this house and they're all gathered to have dinner. But they're having an argument, which was a common argument amongst them about who's the greatest, which really meant who below Jesus is kind of like his co-leader, is the greatest person amongst them. And in fact, they were asking that because they wanted to know not who was the greatest, because Jesus would take the cake in that one, but who was the least. Because the least got to do all of the dirty jobs that they didn't want to do. And specifically in this passage, the dirty job in question was washing people's feet, because it was Jewish custom that people would kind of cleanse themselves before going to dinner, kind of in a way that, oversimplifying, but in a way that we wash our hands before we eat. That was more of a habit for them than just washing their hands. It was part of the Jewish religion that they had to be clean before they sat down. And first it was just gross. They had dirt caked all over their sandals, and probably tunics are all red from dirt because it wasn't pretty. The roads were all muddy, and if it rained, forget about it. People were just completely dirty, but at the very least, they were dusty. So before getting to dinner, and nobody wants to eat dinner next to somebody that's all dirty. I know, how many of you like to play outside? I grew up in Brazil, so I like to play outside a lot. And right before I came home, Mom was like, no, go get the hose and go hose yourself off because that is unacceptable inside my house. So pretty much what was happening here was that. But the twist is that at that time, there was not a hose and you didn't do that yourself. In fact, there was a servant in most households, or at least in the wealthy ones, there was a servant that would do that dirty job. And in the households where there wasn't a servant, the youngest or the least, the one that always got the flak jobs, or the one that was always least respected, got that job. And amongst them, they were trying to figure out who that person would be. And Jesus, hearing them argue about this over and over and over and over and over again, silently decides to get up, put a towel around his waist, go get the basin of water, and he just kneels down and starts washing their feet. One disciple, then another one, then another one, then another one, until he got through the 12. And I know that Rob touched a little bit on the little fit that Peter throws, and I love him. And John is the one who's going to say Peter is the one who threw a fit, so that's why I love him too. But we're going to get past that part because Jesus just kept ignoring that. He answered him and then went to the next one and washed their feet. And at the end of that is where we're going to pick up right here on John 13. And I brought my Bible, even though I have it up here, because I want to encourage you guys to have your Bibles and not read it upside down like mine was. But if you go with me, Rob wants credit right there for having his paper Bible. Who else has their paper Bible? Put it up. Be proud, guys. You don't need to be ashamed to have this. I mean, I love this. Mine is all marked up. And I encourage you guys to read it. But again, we are not forcing you. We're just encouraging you to have one. And if you don't have a Bible, let us know. We're going to get you a paper one. And you can get the YouVersion on your phone too. But she got hers. That's okay, as long as you're reading the word. So let's pick up with me in verse 12 when it says, when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? Interjection, because I've shown you this time and time again and you don't understand, so I'm going to ask you if you understand. He said, you call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is no greater than his master, not is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. So it's just short, only 5 verses, but the things that are in here, they're very simple. I think were very profound, and they kind of have altered my life, and even to the point that it has brought me to this church and doing the job that I do now. But beyond that, it has altered my life outside of these walls, because what we do here will count, but the lessons in these 5 verses will count for the rest of our lives, and especially outside of here when we are interacting with other people. So don't mind the simplicity here, but also don't miss how deep these lessons are. Because, first of all, Jesus, as I said, had to show the disciples, and then he said, pretty much, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to ask you if you understood, and if you didn't understand, I'm going to teach you what I have just done. And what he was doing here is that he was setting up a whole different relationship between the attitude of a servant and also the heart, and beyond that, the meaning of a servant and what it actually meant to be a true servant. You see, Jesus, as we know, was not only the disciples' teacher and our teacher, but he was the God of the universe. I mean, if you've been around the church a little while, you probably heard say that Jesus was fully man and fully God. So he was God and was with God since the beginning of time, and then decided to come to earth to give himself up so that we could be here today. Pretty much that's like the crux of the gospel, so that God came and made himself human so that we could have a relationship with God again. And even in that, so imagine the God of the universe who is here on earth willingly decided to take the lowest of the jobs, the dirtiest job that anybody could have gotten at that point in that situation. He said, if anybody has authority here, if anybody has a title here, if anybody has a calling, that's me. But you guys are arguing amongst yourselves, so I'm going to show you what it means to be a servant, and that no job is below me and no person is below me. So in doing that, the first lesson that Jesus was teaching us is that as Christian leaders, we're called to be servant leaders. Because you see, by just the definition of the word Christian, which means a follower of Christ. So if you look further into that, people that are trying to emulate Jesus and to be more like him, he said, all right, if you are in fact trying to be like me, I'm going to show you what I do so that you can go and do the same. And if that nuance wasn't enough, he spelled it out for them. He said, I have done this as an example to you, so go and do the same. I mean, at that point, if you didn't get it, I don't know how clearer it can get. Because I understand sometimes Jesus spoke in parables, and sometimes we don't understand the lessons that we're learning. We kind of lose the nuance. There's some of us, sometimes me, I'm a direct person. If you want to tell me something, don't try to beat around the bush or try to paint pictures for me. I'm not going to understand, or I'm not going to want to understand. Instead, you got to tell me directly and straight. And not everybody is like that, so Jesus catered to both. So he showed, and then he said, go and do the same. So we see that our mandates as Christians, and above that as Christian leaders, as people who want to also set an example for others, we shouldn't be setting an example of telling people about the authority that we have. We should be showing them, which is to go and serve them just as Jesus did. And you see, the only reason why Jesus could do that with such confidence and not worry about what he would have looked like to his disciples is because he just didn't worry about what he would look like for his disciples. It was as simple as that. You see, so many times we decide not to serve and we decide not to put others first because we're thinking of ourselves. We're always thinking about, what am I going to look like if I do this? What am I going to miss on if I decide to serve this person? Am I going to be thought of less because I did this? Or are people going to think about me too much if I do this? Sometimes we, out of not wanting to be in the spotlight, shy away from doing something that we're being called to do. So the antidote to this is humility. So as Christian leaders, we're called to lead with humility. Jesus humbled himself. Again, I don't need to paint the picture that Jesus was the God of the universe who came and humbled himself as much as he could to live like us and leave an example for us and to be with us as we learn to do the same. So, as it says here, he had to not only show that, hey, I'm willingly, deliberately putting myself into this, but he was also trying to say that while we're here on earth, we're still under the authority of someone else. Even if we decide to put ourselves in positions that are somewhat lower, we don't have the right to think that we deserve something greater or that we should be looking for something greater, because there is one who is greater than us all, for whom we share a mission. So Jesus had, in submission, which is a word that many of us dislike, it's okay, we can keep studying that. He was submission, under a mission of someone else. So he said here, and he said, truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is the messenger greater than the one who sent him. And I know I give the disciples a little bit of flack sometimes because, like I said, I see myself in them. So I'm like, come on, dude, you couldn't get that lesson. Jesus had to spell it out for you. He had to say, go and serve others. Because sometimes in my head, Jesus is a little sassy, but he didn't. He was much, much nicer than that. That's how he talks to me. He said, listen, I know this is confusing for you in what he was doing because, again, in setting up their relationship with Jesus, he was a teacher, they were students, they were learning under him, and they were with him this whole time, but their culture said, you should always respect this person, you should always be serving them, they will always be above you. And in doing that, the rabbis of the time knew that it was their disciples' job to do all the lowest jobs that they didn't want to do. Their job was to teach. Jesus instead took that relationship and just turned it on its head and said, I'm going to serve you. So yes, that was awesome, but it was thoroughly confusing to the disciples. I can only imagine, and that's where Peter was like, no, Lord, you can't wash my feet. He kind of freaked out. It wasn't just because he was being pompous or he was being arrogant or wanted to show off. It was because he's like, no, this is not okay. This is not what we understand the culture to be. And instead, Jesus was like, no, I came to set a new culture. Because not only do I want to do this, I am willingly putting myself through this. I can do that in confidence that I'm still under someone else. That even though in the culture I might be higher than you, quote unquote, and I'm turning that on its head, there's one who's higher than me, and I serve his purpose. So when we're serving each other, when we're serving other people, we aren't just saying, I do this because Jesus told me to do, and the Bible told me to do so, and Paulina was up there preaching and telling me that I had to do this. I'm doing this because I serve one whose mission is much higher than my mission, whose plans for me are much greater than my own, so I decide to put myself under his plans because they're perfect, and I'm not. So when we're serving, there is a much, much deeper meaning to what we're doing. It isn't just, I'm going to do this out of obligation. I'm going to do this because I want to join a mission that's greater than my own. Because Jesus, who was God himself here on earth, decided to do that because the Father was still in heaven. So he decided to do the same. And knowing that we still wouldn't understand, and with the danger that we would try to do this out of obligation, he went ahead and spelled it out for the disciples once more, a step further, and he said, let me make it clear, I'm not doing this. I'm not deciding to submit myself to this just out of obligation. I'm not deciding to submit myself just so we can establish a new authority. I'm deciding to do this because of how I feel about you and how I see you. Because I don't see you just as servants. I see you as friends. And in John 15:13, he said, greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. And he tried showing them, and he tried speaking to them, and then he spelled it all out. He said, hey, I don't call you servants. In the next verse after that, he said, because I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. Because everything the Father has revealed to me, I have revealed to you. And he goes on to say, I'm doing this so that you can bear fruit, and fruit that lasts. So Jesus was saying, you're not just my disciples, you're not just my students, and I'm not just calling you to be servants, I'm calling you to be friends. And friendship is only true friendship if it's rooted in love. Because if it's not rooted in love, you're gonna get a little bothered by that favor that somebody asked you to do. I know I do when I'm not doing it out of love. If it's not out of love, you're gonna try to get credit for things that you do. And believe me, everybody loves credit, but this is not about it's not what Jesus was all about. He wasn't about credit. He was about serving and putting himself putting himself second so that we would learn not to put ourselves first. So, greater love has no one than this, that he would lay his life down for his friends. Now, my question to us all is that, hey, if Jesus was turning this upside down and he wanted to show them, hey, I don't just call you servants. Even though I am your master, I am your friend. That must be some implication for us, right? So Jesus, in trying to flip that, he wasn't just trying to say, okay, I am creating these people. I'm not just a teacher creating students. I am a friend creating other friends so that they can go out there and make friends themselves. So when we're out here, when we're actually serving, our mandate is not to teach people. Our mandate is to invite people into friendship. So when we're out there and we're saying, hey, I'm going to decide to come early and, hang out over here and put things together, it's not about the task. It's about people. It's not about you coming early and doing something because the church needs people to do things, which we do. And until the end of time, if we keep putting on events, we're going to need people to do things. That's secondary. If at the end of the day, setting up the chairs is less than perfect, but you made a new friend and you showed somebody that you love them and you pointed them in the direction of Jesus, that's what matters. It's not about having everything perfect. And believe me, that comes from somebody who is very task-oriented, and I like to have things very well done, and my friends are laughing because they know that I'll spend hours in something that seems meaningless to them, but it's not about that. It's about people. Jesus saw beyond the task. Jesus saw beyond what was in front of him so that they would learn to see beyond what was in front of them too and have a higher vision and a higher calling. See, again, Jesus was saying, I'm not here to just do a task. I'm here to serve a message. And of the one who's higher than me, and his message is, I love you so much that here's my son so that he can show you how much I love you. And that's in John 3:16, right? We can all just say that out of memory, and I'm not going to make us say it because I've done that before. But if we don't not learn how to lead out of friendship, we're never going to achieve the mission of God. We might achieve the mission that's in front of us, put in front of us by men, but we'll never achieve the mission of God. And last but not least, the third lesson that we learn about the way that Jesus leads is that he led with sacrifice. You know, the two verses that are up there, and I did repeat them on purpose a couple of times, which again was saying that greater love has no one than this, then he would lay down his life for his friends. And then in Mark 10:45, in another situation where the disciples were arguing about who was the greatest again, I told you that was something that they did often. Jesus had said, for even the Son of Man himself, and that was a word for the Messiah, right? So the highest person, their Savior, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, the word ransom over there is the one that always sticks out to me, and it means that you're paying for something that's already yours. So that's so deep for me because Jesus came to say, hey, I'm going to pay for this. Again, it's mine, but I'm going to pay for this with the highest price I can possibly give so that I can have them again. So Jesus came and laid down his life so that he could have our lives, and he didn't spare any price. And my challenge for us tonight is for us to think about what are the things that we are willing to sacrifice, because Jesus, the bar that he set was pretty high. He gave his life, and though I don't think there's going to be the calling for many in here to literally lay down your physical lives, that your heart will stop beating because of something that God wants you to do, though that may be the call for some people in here, he is calling you to give something in your life in sense of self. Whereas something that you're holding onto that you're not willing to give away so that others can have that as well. That you're not willing to give away so that you can invite somebody into friendship with you and with Jesus. What are you willing to sacrifice? Is it your time? Is it social plans? Is it perhaps a dream or a calling that you thought it was yours, but you've been doubting it for the past few days or weeks, and you're wondering if God is calling you in a different direction? Friends, I'm not doing this. I'm not asking you this to just guilt you at all into doing anything here. If anything, what Jesus said here was spell out to us that if we are to be his followers, that's something that he wants for us, not because it will make church look better, not because it will make him look better, but because it changes something in our lives. Because until we learn to put ourselves as second, we will never be just like he was. So what are we willing to sacrifice tonight? What are we willing to give up so that others can have a greater and deeper and perhaps a new relationship with Jesus because they never heard or saw people who acted like him? So this is not gloom and doom at all, and it's in fact a moment for celebration. And I want to invite here one of my friends who has seen and done this so well. And he's here all the way from Rwanda to speak to us. So I want to call up Moses, and Rob and a couple of people are going to help me bring seats for us so that we can be comfortable. But Moses is the country director for World Relief in Rwanda, and we've had a long, long relationship with him, and I got to call him friend, not just from the times that he was to come here and speak to us, but also in the times where he came to bring updates. And I think Josh has known him for over a decade right now, and he's been serving so faithfully. So Moses, thank you so much for being here. Guys, help me welcome him. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
It's great. It's great to have him here. Thanks for coming. And I know I spoke to you a little bit before, and just to give these guys a little bit of a context, many of you have been here in Rwanda nights before and in times that we interviewed Moses. But again, he is a country director in Rwanda, and we have a partnership with World Relief there. And because of our partnership, we're able to serve an entire province or district of Nyamasheke. And I had the privilege to be there in 2016 and haven't forgotten about what I've seen there since, because it was so profound. And I can truly say that I've seen very few people serve God and serve others with as much joy and as much wisdom as the people of Rwanda have, and especially the people in World Relief. So I had talked to him and asked him a couple of questions and asked them to just tell us, if you can, how have you seen the church help bring transformation to Rwanda by leading them through friendship?
Well, thank you so much, Pauline. From the work that we do in Rwanda, how I've seen this is through church unity. We've seen different church leaders, Presbyterians, Anglicans, Methodists, Pentecostals, charismatic people, come together, and they've decided to lay down their differences because of the denominational boundaries, lay down their differences on gender, women and men are welcome, lay down their boundaries around days of worship, resources, and through that unity and collaboration, we've seen pastors start to give gifts to one another. We've seen pastors give cows. Now, cows are very important in our Rwandan culture. If someone gives you a cow, that is truly a genuine gift. And they've started to give each other cows. They've invited each other into households so that it's not only a meeting, but also their wives are able to witness this true friendship that they're about. And I think there is no better way to model a friendship as church leaders to the community, that we are all one, and this is the best way the community will know that Christ has really sent us.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And have you seen that kind of trickle down into the people that they are leading as well? Have you seen new friendships be built?
Yes, we've seen now people like in the market, people are able to respect one another because I know I've seen my pastor work together with your pastor, work together. There is no way we can't do business together. We've seen this happen in our savings group. We've seen it in our Agriculture for Life programs. We've seen it in our kids club. Because they've seen the leaders serve and their friends, it has also impacted the congregations.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just to kind of paint the picture for you guys, many times he mentioned here a couple of the programs, including their savings groups. And can you tell us a little bit more about what they look like?
A savings group is an initiative we started because of the issues we have of poverty, that we have over 49% of our population that cannot make $2 per day. And because of these levels of poverty, they are not bankable. There is no bank that is going to give them a loan. Right. So what we've done is that through these resources, get a group of 25 people, encourage them to save 50 cents per week. And if you're able to save 50 cents per week, within a month, you have saved $2. Now, if you have a group of 25 people, each saving $2, that is already $50 that is saved. Within 4 months, they'll have saved $400. Wow. And they're able to loan each other. So people start to get $50 of loan, $20 to buy a goat, $30 to pay tuition. And through that, the most vulnerable are able to access cash that they can use to meet their basic needs.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So this is pretty much the church coming together and figuring out who here has the greatest need. Not who here is the greatest among us, but who here has the greatest need, that we can come together and then help them achieve or get what they need for this moment. That's an amazing result of just the church putting aside what they have and coming out of friendship, because if we don't trust each other, they're probably not going to give, right? No. Not at all. So having the opportunity to have sat in one of those meetings is amazing to see, not just what they're doing while they're happening, but what they're doing before. Because oftentimes these are people who live next to each other who perhaps go to different churches, correct?
Correct.
So they're neighbors, but they're not friends until Jesus comes into the picture, and they can see how their lives can be different, and then others' lives can be different as well. Yeah. And you mentioned them putting aside differences and putting aside even money, and that to me leads a little bit into sacrifice. And I know that for people to advance and in a lot of the ways that the church leaders are working, they're asking people to sacrifice a few things for the sake of the greater good or even for the sake of one person. What does that look like in Rwanda?
I think from the work we do, I've witnessed the greatest sacrifice from the volunteers. The volunteers are the heroes for all the work we do. Imagine you go into a community where this same person has the same issues as you are. They are also making less than $2 per day. But because of the love of Christ, we ask them that we can train you and you can visit your neighbor and you can take a health message, you can encourage them to come into savings group. So what I've seen and what is so precious that we continue to appreciate from the volunteers is the sacrifice of time, where they will say, I will sacrifice my 2 hours of working on my field, and I will use these 2 hours to go and help a vulnerable family so that they can have this message and understand the importance of having a kitchen garden. I'll sacrifice my 2 hours and go and help a widow have a home. I'll sacrifice my 2 hours to go and help someone join a savings group because I'm seeing how it is affecting them. So that sacrifice to me has been the most precious way to see the leaders as volunteers in our communities.
Wow, that's priceless. Like time, really, you can't put a price on that when your livelihood depends on the work that you're going to do in your field. And I think you mentioned to go and make a house for a widow. Can you tell us a little bit of the process of when you guys get together to build a house for people? Because I think some of the people here who are newer have never seen what that looks like.
Yeah, we work with again, through the unit of the different churches, we will identify the most vulnerable irrespective of faith. So if all together we identify that there is a vulnerable widow or an orphan and they need support, so we will work together and say, okay, what is needed? They have a piece of land, but we need to make sure that there is water, there is dirt, there is a frame that we are going to use, they need iron sheets, they need the sticks. So the community will bring all this together and they will agree on time and they will go and put this structure up. Some will find doors, others will find windows, and everyone will bring according to what they have. And that way, cross-denominational, we are serving people. And this person may even be a non-believer. They don't have to be church members. And that has helped to really influence community. And through the church leadership, again, we've seen that the best way to influence is through friendship, not through enemy. It's easy to influence your friend than your enemy. And if you're able to continuously build friendship in our community through these works, we have seen that's a potential way to advance the kingdom of God.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think we could sit on that nugget of wisdom for the rest of the week, if not for the rest of the year. Again, about it's easier to influence your friend than it is to influence your enemy. So thank you so much for being here, Moses. I know that.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you so much.
I know that it's a pleasure for us to have you and to just keep working with you, and we look forward to where our partnership will take us.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you. Yeah. So, guys, this wasn't just for show. This was to show us that this is what it looks like in real life. When we decide to sacrifice not just resources in terms of money, but also sacrifice our time so that somebody else can have a house, so that somebody else can have a business opportunity, where they can go to school, where they can truly get to know the Lord in a way that they've never known him because they never had somebody to introduce him to Jesus. So my question for us today is, what can we do to influence the people around us by the things that we sacrifice and the invitation into friendship? And the 3 opportunities that I'm gonna put up right there, right now, for us to step into that today, because, I mean, if we talk about this, and we can't just talk about it, we gotta be about it, right? Oh, no. Yeah. We can just talk about it. We got to be about it, right? Yeah. There we go. So the 3 steps that we're going to get right into today is that one, you saw what's happening out there. It's Serving Sunday, and it's a shameless plug for you to step in. Again, not because things need to happen here at the church, which they do, and they'll always will, but because when you're serving others, you're inviting them into that friendship. You're also learning how to sacrifice of yourself for the sake of someone else. So I put up 2 teams up there that I think really need our help. And they're the ones that, especially if you're struggling with like not getting credit for something and feeling a little bitter, these are the people that serve behind the scenes, but I tell you, they're the most joyful people here at Sanctuary. They get here early and they stay late and they love doing it, and you're probably